10 Irish surnames that reveal ancient Gaelic roots. Introduction: The Echoes of the Gaels. When you walk through the mist-shrouded valleys of Ireland, you are treading on earth that has soaked up thousands of years of myth, blood, and defiance. This is a landscape where history is not just buried in the ground, it is carried in the very names of the people. To the untrained ear, a surname is simply a tag, a bureaucratic necessity used for passports, bank accounts, and roll calls. But in Ireland, a surname is a time machine. It is a living, breathing artifact of the ancient Gaelic order. Before the Norman knights clad in iron arrived on these shores in 1169, and long before the English crown systematically dismantled the Irish clan system, Ireland was a land of kings, warriors, poets, and fiercely independent tribal dynasties. In the ancient Gaelic system, your name was your deed to the land, your military allegiance, and your ancestral pride. The Gaels used a patronymic system. If you were a man, you took Mac, meaning son of, or O, often anglicized to O, meaning grandson or descendant of. But the survival of these names was not guaranteed. Starting in the 16th and 17th centuries, the English colonization of Ireland brought the penal laws, a brutal legal code designed to crush the Catholic Irish and erase their culture. Speaking the Irish language was outlawed. Owning land became nearly impossible for the native Gaels, and in order to find work, survive, or avoid persecution, millions of Irish families were forced to anglicize their names. The proud O's and Macs were dropped. The harsh, poetic Gaelic consonants were smoothed out to fit English tongues. Yet the roots remained. Beneath the modernized spelling of common Irish last names lies a hidden world of Viking slayers, cattle raiders, warrior queens, and high kings. Today, we are going to decode 10 common Irish surnames. If you carry one of these names, you don't just have Irish ancestry. You have the blood of the ancient Gaels running through your veins. 1. Murphy, O Murchada, the Sea Warriors. We begin with the most common surname in all of Ireland and a name that is spread to every corner of the globe, Murphy. Today, it sounds friendly, almost ubiquitous, but its origins are forged in the fires of naval warfare. The name derives from the ancient Gaelic O Murchada, pronounced O Muraka. To break it down, Muir means sea, and Cath means battle. Therefore, a Murchada is a sea warrior, or a sea battler. This name emerged during a time of existential terror in Ireland, the Viking Age. In the 9th and 10th centuries, Norse longships terrorized the Irish coastlines, plundering monasteries and establishing heavily fortified settlements that would eventually become cities like Dublin, Waterford, and Wexford. The native Irish had to adapt or perish. The ancestors of the Murphys were those who took the fight to the waves. The most prominent branch of the O Murchada clan originated in the province of Leinster, specifically in County Wexford. They were a powerful sepit, descended from Milesius, the mythical king of Spain, whose sons supposedly conquered Ireland. For centuries, the O Murchada chiefs held vast territories, ruling as the kings of Leinster. When the Norman invasion swept through Leinster in the 12th century, the sea warriors fiercely resisted the heavy cavalry of the invaders. Though they were eventually pushed out of their ancestral strongholds, their numbers only grew. During the centuries of English rule, the harsh O Murchada was forcibly anglicized into Murphy, McMurphy, and Morphy. But every time a Murphy looks out at the ocean, they are looking at the battlefield of their ancestors. 2. O'Brien, the High King's blood. If you bear the name O'Brien, you do not just belong to a clan. You belong to a royal dynasty. You are the direct descendant of one of the most legendary figures in European history, Brian Boru, the High King of Ireland. The name O'Brien literally translates to descendant of Brian. The root of the name Brian is believed to come from the Old Celtic word bray, meaning hill, high, or noble. And no one aimed higher than Brian Boru. Born in the 10th century, Brian belonged to the Dalcassians, Dal Jakash, a fierce warrior tribe in the province of Munster. Through sheer military genius, ruthless politics, and an unbreakable will, Brian did the impossible. He united the endlessly squabbling Irish clans under one rule. He became the Ard Rí, the High King. The defining moment of the O'Brien legacy came on Good Friday in the year 1014 at the Battle of Clontarf. The Viking forces of Dublin, allied with rebellious Irish kings, sought to crush Brian's power. It was a bloodbath. Tens of thousands of men hacked each other to pieces in the mud outside Dublin. The Dalcassians, leading the charge, broke the back of Viking power in Ireland forever. But victory came at the ultimate price. As the Vikings fled to their ships, a fleeing Norse mercenary broke into the High King's tent. Brian Boru, an old man by then, was praying. The Vikings struck him down with an axe, killing the king, but not his legacy. His descendants, the O'Brien, ruled the kingdom of Thomond in the southwest of Ireland for centuries. They built massive stone fortresses, like the famous Bunratty Castle. Even when they submitted to the English crown in the 1500s under the policy of surrender and regrant, they remained earls and barons. To be an O'Brien is to carry the memory of the man who saved Ireland. 3. Kelly, O. Cialeg, the bright-headed horseman. Kelly is the second most common surname in Ireland, but do not let its familiarity fool you. Behind this name is a history of ferocious independence and martial pride. The name comes from the Gaelic O Ciale. The exact meaning of Sealach has been debated by historians for centuries. Some translate it as bright-headed or bright-haired, while others lean towards a more aggressive translation, troublesome, strife, or frequenting churches. Given their history, the martial translations fit perfectly. While there were several distinct O'Kelly clans across Ireland, the most formidable and famous was the O'Ciale of Uí Main, Hymeni, a massive kingdom in the western province of Connaught, spanning parts of modern-day Galway and Roscommon. The Kellys were renowned horsemen. In the ancient Gaelic texts, the kingdom of Uí Main was practically an independent republic. The O'Kelly chieftain was inaugurated with great ceremony, standing on a sacred stone, receiving a white willow wand as a symbol of pure, uncorrupted rule. They were not just isolated lords, they were heavily involved in the brutal politics of medieval Ireland. At the Battle of Clontarf, the great O'Kelly chief, Todgmor Ó Chiallaigh, fought alongside Brian Boru. Todgmor fought with such ferocity that he was said to have slain a monstrous beast emerging from the sea during the battle, before falling in combat. The O'Kelly crest still features an Enfield, a mythical creature with the head of a fox, the chest of a greyhound, the talons of an eagle, and the hindquarters of a wolf, which supposedly emerged from the sea to protect the fallen chief's body. Through centuries of warfare, famines, and the aggressive expansion of the British Empire, the O was stripped away to make the name more acceptable to English landlords, but the Kellys survived, spreading their bright-headed strife and brilliance across the New World. 4. O'Neill, the Red Hand of Ulster. There is perhaps no surname in Ireland more steeped in violent mythological glory than O'Neill. To understand the O'Neills is to understand the absolute peak of Gaelic aristocracy. The name O'Neill means descendant of Niall. And this is not just any Niall. The name traces back to Niall of the Nine Hostages, a legendary 5th century High King of Ireland. According to the annals, Niall was a conqueror who raided the coasts of Britain and France, taking hostages from all the opposing kingdoms to enforce his dominance. It is even said that during one of these raids, his men captured a young British boy who would later return to Ireland as St. Patrick. The O'Neills ruled the northern province of Ulster with an iron fist for almost 1,000 years. Their symbol is the Red Hand of Ulster, a bloody emblem born from a gruesome myth. The story goes that two chieftains were racing their boats toward the northern shore. The first to touch the land would claim it forever. Seeing that he was falling behind, the ancestor of the O'Neills took his sword, hacked off his own right hand, and threw it over the waves onto the beach, claiming the kingdom in blood. The O'Neill dynasty produced over 50 High Kings of Ireland. They were the ultimate defenders of the Gaelic order. In the late 16th century, Hugh O'Neill, the Earl of Tyrone, led the final massive Gaelic rebellion against the encroaching armies of Queen Elizabeth I. Known as the 9 Years' War, it was a brilliant, tragic military campaign. O'Neill's forces fought with cutting-edge tactics, blending guerrilla warfare with disciplined pike and musket formations. But they were eventually defeated at the Battle of Kinsale in 1601. In 1607, the great O'Neill chiefs fled to mainland Europe in an event known as the Flight of the Earls, marking the definitive end of the ancient Gaelic order. Yet, the name O'Neill remains a monument to absolute sovereignty. 5. McCarthy, Mac Carthy, the Kings of Desmond. We move from the frozen north of Ulster to the lush green valleys of the deep south. If your name is McCarthy, your ancestors were the undisputed masters of Munster. The name derives from Mac Carthy, pronounced Mac Carthy. Carthage was an 11th century king, and his name means loving or amiable. However, the history of the MacCarthys is written in stone and steel rather than love and amiability. The MacCarthys were the kings of Desmond, a massive kingdom covering modern-day Cork and Kerry. When the Anglo-Normans invaded in the 12th century, bringing terrifying new weapons like the heavy cavalry charge and the crossbow, the MacCarthys did not break. Instead, they adapted. Under the leadership of their fierce kings, they inflicted several crushing defeats on the Norman knights, preserving their Gaelic kingdom in the south for centuries. But they were not just warriors, they were visionary builders. The MacCarthys constructed some of the most stunning fortifications and religious sites in Ireland. Their most famous creation is Blarney Castle. It was Cormac MacCarthy, a 15th century chieftain, who built the current stone structure. Legend has it that Cormac was involved in a massive legal dispute. After saving an old woman from drowning, she rewarded him with a magical stone. If he kissed it, he would receive the gift of the gab, the ability to speak with profound eloquence and persuasion. He kissed the stone, won his court case, and set it into the battlements of his castle. Later, when Queen Elizabeth I demanded that the MacCarthy clan surrender their lands, the chieftain responded with endless, beautifully worded letters that promised everything but delivered nothing. Frustrated, the queen famously shouted, "This is all Blarney, what he says he does not mean!" And thus, a new word entered the English language. The MacCarthys eventually lost their royal status, their castles confiscated by the forces of Oliver Cromwell, but their name remains synonymous with the unyielding spirit of the South. 6. O'Connor, O Conchobair, the last high kings. Some names carry the weight of ultimate tragedy. The name O'Connor is one of them. To be an O'Connor is to carry the memory of the absolute zenith of Gaelic Ireland and its final devastating fall. The name O Conchobair translates roughly to patron of warriors or hound of desire. The O'Connors were the royal dynasty of Connaught, the rugged, beautiful province in the west of Ireland. They were a clan of immense political and military power. In the 12th century, the O'Connors achieved the ultimate prize. Turlogh O'Connor and later his son Rory O'Connor, were recognized as the High Kings of Ireland. Roedri O'Connor was a man of high culture, an administrator who tried to modernize the chaotic Gaelic political system. But he was destined to be the last of his kind. During his reign, a rival Irish king, Dermot MacMurrough, was exiled. In a move of desperate revenge, Dermot sailed to England and invited the Anglo-Norman warlords, led by Richard de Clare, known as Strongbow, to invade Ireland and help him reclaim his throne. Roedri O'Connor watched as the heavily armored Norman knights tore through the traditional Irish defenses. Despite raising massive armies to push them into the sea, Roedri was outmatched by the military technology and organized logistics of the invaders. He was forced to sign the Treaty of Windsor in 1175, submitting to King Henry II of England. He was the last native High King of Ireland. He died in the austere monastic settlement of Cong, a king without a kingdom. The O'Connor clan fought on for centuries in the West, defending their lands against English sheriffs and rival clans alike. The name was heavily anglicized, but it remains a direct link to the final days of Irish sovereignty. 7. Gallagher, O Gal Cobhair, the foreign helpers. In the wild mountainous terrain of County Donegal in the extreme northwest of Ireland, a different kind of warrior emerged. If your name is Gallagher, your roots are tied to fierce loyalty and heavy infantry. The name O Gaelchopair is a fascinating linguistic puzzle. Gael means foreign and Cabhair means help or support. Therefore, a Gallagher is a foreign helper. But what does that mean? In medieval Ireland, warfare evolved. The native Irish light infantry needed heavy support to combat the armored Norman knights. They began importing heavily armed, axe-wielding mercenaries from the Norse Gaelic clans of Scotland. These terrifying warriors were known as the Galloglass. The Gallaghers were intimately tied to this military tradition. The O Gaelchopair clan was a senior sept of the northern Uí Néill dynasty. But they did not rule as kings. Instead, they were the elite military commanders and the loyal cavalrymen for the powerful O'Donnell dynasty, the Lords of Tyrconnell, modern-day Donegal. Whenever the O'Donnells went to war against the English or against their bitter rivals, the O'Neills, the Gallaghers, were at the tip of the spear. They were known for their absolute fearlessness and their unshakable loyalty. Because of their remote geographic location in Donegal, shielded by mountains and bogs, the Gallaghers held onto their Gaelic culture, language, and lands much longer than the clans of the Fertile East. It was only during the catastrophic plantation of Ulster in the 17th century, when the British Crown confiscated millions of acres of Catholic land to give to Protestant settlers, that the Gaelagers were systematically stripped of their power. The O was dropped, but the name Gallagher remained a testament to the heavy shock troops of the Gaelic North. 8. Kennedy, O Sinead, the Ugly Heads. Today, the name Kennedy is instantly associated with American political royalty, power, and the tragic glamour of Camelot. But long before John F. Kennedy sat in the Oval Office, his ancestors were carving out a bloody reputation in the hills of Munster. The Gaelic origin of the name is O Sinead. Etymologists translate it in two parts, Sian meaning head, and Idig meaning ugly, grim, or helmeted. Thus, the name means helmet-headed or ugly-headed. In the brutal context of medieval Irish warfare, being called grim-headed was a massive compliment. It meant you were a terrifying presence on the battlefield. The Kennedys were a branch of the Dalcassians, the same fierce tribe that produced Brian Boru. In fact, Brian Boru's father was named Sinead MacLorcain. The Kennedys were literally the blood relatives of the High King. Following the epic Battle of Clontarf and the subsequent power struggles, the O Sinead clan was pushed out of their original homeland in County Clare. They migrated eastward, settling in the rugged terrain of North Tipperary. There they became undisputed lords of the region, building tower houses and fiercely defending their borders against both the English and neighboring Irish clans. The Kennedys were survivors during the darkest days of the 19th century, when the Great Hunger, the Potato Famine, devastated Ireland, killing over 1 million people and forcing 2 million more to flee. The Kennedys boarded the coffin ships. They brought their grim-headed resilience to the slums of Boston and New York, fighting their way from extreme poverty to the very pinnacle of global power. The name Kennedy is a perfect circle of history, from ancient kings to modern presidents. 9. Sullivan, O Suiliab Hyen, the Dark-Eyed Survivors. In the southwest of Ireland, specifically in the counties of Cork and Kerry, there is a name that represents perhaps the most heartbreaking and heroic story of survival in Irish history. The name is Sullivan, derived from O Suiliab Hyen. The name's meaning is highly poetic. Suil means eye, and Du means black or dark. Thus, a Sullivan is the dark-eyed one. The O'Sullivans were a powerful clan in the Kingdom of Munster, dividing into several major branches, most notably the O'Sullivan Moor and the O'Sullivan Bear. They were wealthy lords controlling heavily fortified castles along the dramatic coastlines of the Beara Peninsula, surviving through a mix of agriculture, fishing, and piracy. But their world collapsed at the end of the 9 Years' War. In 1602, the English forces, seeking to crush the last pockets of Gaelic resistance, laid siege to the O'Sullivan stronghold of Dunboy Castle. The castle was pulverized by artillery, its defenders slaughtered to the last man. The chieftain, Donald Cam O'Sullivan Bear, was left with nothing but his people. In the dead of winter, facing starvation and advancing English armies, he made a desperate decision. He gathered 1,000 of his followers, men, women, and children, and began an epic march of 300 miles north, seeking refuge with his allies in Ulster. It was a march of pure horror. They were hunted by English soldiers and attacked by rival Irish clans seeking favor with the crown. They marched through blizzards, starving, freezing, and eating their own horses to survive. By the time they reached the safety of O'Rourke's castle in Leitrim 2 weeks later, only 35 people remained alive out of the original 1,000. Donald Cam O'Sullivan Bear eventually escaped to Spain, where he was murdered in a sword fight, but the bloodline survived. The O was dropped under the pressure of English rule, but the dark-eyed survivors endured. Today, Sullivan is the third most common name in Ireland, a monument to human endurance. 10. Doherty, O Docharte, the Unyielding. We close our journey in the furthest reaches of the north with a name that literally means defiance. Doherty. The name comes from O Docharte. In Gaelic, Dochartach translates to hurtful, obstructive, or the unyielding one. And no clan lived up to its name quite like the O'Dohertys of Inishowen. Inishowen is a desolate, staggeringly beautiful peninsula in County Donegal, battered by the Atlantic Ocean. The O'Dohertys ruled this isolated stronghold. For centuries, they managed a delicate balancing act, fighting alongside the powerful O'Neills and O'Donnells, while maintaining their own fierce independence. But the definitive moment for the O'Doherty clan came in 1608. The 9 Years' War had ended. The great Gaelic lords had fled to Europe. The English were preparing to heavily colonize Ulster with Protestant settlers. Sir Cahir O'Doherty, the young 21-year-old chieftain of the clan, had initially tried to work with the English authorities to save his people's land. But after being brutally insulted and physically assaulted by the English governor of Derry, Cahir's Gaelic pride snapped. He launched a sudden, devastating rebellion. The unyielding one captured the city of Derry, burned it to the ground, and killed the governor. For a few brief, glorious months, it seemed as though the Gaelic resistance had been reborn. But the English response was overwhelming. Cahir was hunted down and shot through the head at the Rock of Doon. His head was severed, placed on a pike, and displayed on the gates of Dublin to send a message. Following Cahir's death, the O'Doherty lands were confiscated, marking the true beginning of the plantation of Ulster. The clan was scattered, forced to drop the O and become simply Doherty or Doherty, but their defiance was never fully erased. Conclusion: the living monuments Murphy, O'Brien, Kelly, O'Neill, McCarthy, O'Connor, Gallagher, Kennedy, Sullivan, Doherty. These are not just names on a census, they are the echoes of a lost civilization. The English Empire spent centuries trying to erase the Gaelic identity. They outlawed the language, banned the religion, stole the land, and forced the names to change. But empires crumble and bloodlines endure. When millions of Irish men and women were forced onto famine ships in the 19th century, they had no gold, no property, and no passports. The only thing they took with them was their names. Today, these names are spoken in New York, London, Sydney, and Buenos Aires. They are a testament to a people who refuse to be erased. If you carry one of these names, you carry a piece of the ancient Gaelic world. You are the descendant of kings, sea warriors, foreign helpers, and survivors. Never forget where you come from.